All right, guys, welcome back to Within Tolerance. This is episode 12, and we are back with a special guest. We have Adam from Adam the Machinist.
Hi, guys.
Hey, Adam. So we've got Adam today, and I think some of you may have seen his shop tour, the shop tour of the place he worked from Saunders, or you've seen him on Instagram. But Adam, why don't you give us a little bit of a background on, how you got into machining and what you specialize in, and kind of what people know you for.
Okay. So I got into machining 15 years ago, after school job. My brother actually kind of got me into the industry. He was working for a neighbor's machine shop. Well, the shop wasn't neighborly to us. The owner was. And he got me a job there, and it was cleaning out lathes. And that doesn't really sound like that big of an ordeal, but they would produce anywhere from 10 to 15 tons of chips a week. So just getting all the chips out and into hoppers, and that required 15 to 20 hour a week part-time kid to do that. And after summer of doing that, one day the foreman said, "Hey, do you want to go run that lathe?" And he kind of gave me the quick rundown. And that was my start into machining. The first lathe I ever ran, it was a Lehman, which is like an oil field lathe. So it has a 12-inch through hole, 36-inch chuck, and it actually has a bed and carriage on either side of the headstock. So you could put like a long tube through the headstock and cut timed threads on either end. And so a very large lathe doing very large work pieces was my intro. Now all I had to do to the work pieces was face and chamfer them to length. So it was definitely like a good kid who doesn't know anything type job. But looking back on it, just that's a huge machine, and lathes are particularly dangerous. So I always kind of thought that was an interesting way to get started.
Yeah, definitely a trial by fire for sure.
Yeah, and so that was mainly hydraulic industry there. And then my next job, it was kind of still in town. It was hydraulics as well, but that's where I kind of cut my teeth on CNC. And I was only there for a year, and I moved on, and that's when I got into tool and die making. And I've been doing that for 8 years now. So that's definitely where I think I'll spend the rest of my career machining, is that arena. I like the workflow. I like the size of everything. I like the precision. I like the machine tools you get to use. It's just a very interesting niche of the machining world.
Yeah, I feel like we've been saying this a lot with all of our guests, but that's another, really specialized area of our trade. Like I know very little about it besides, little bits that I've gleaned here and there.
Well, and that's kind of what drew me to it. Like I always knew I was going to have my own business. My dad was an entrepreneur. All my uncles are entrepreneurs. And one of the things I picked up from a lot of really savvy entrepreneurs is you want something which is kind of got a barrier to entry, not just anybody can do. And so being a guy who bought and put a Haas in his garage, I know how easy that is. So I wouldn't want to have like a 40 by 20 VMC and I make aluminum widgets, because I think that's just so easy to get into. So I definitely wanted to kind of make my career specialized. So when it was time to transition into owning a business, I would be specialized.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
So, Adam, a lot of people know you on Instagram as the guy with the Mori. And I know we're going to probably jump around on the questions we have here, but I really want to know the backstory of that machine and just talk a little bit more about that.
Okay. So the machine was developed in the early 2000s by Morisaki, and they were developing like a whole theory to machine tool building called DCG, which is driven at the center of gravity. And the concept is you're always kind of pushing the axis directly under the centroid of the part's weight or the machine's weight. And that way you don't have any cantilevered mass. And when you get to like a end of 100-inch per minute axis travel, when it stops suddenly and makes a right turn, it doesn't have like these residual shaking vibrations, which cause, cutter gouges. So stuff like that's really important for A, finishing at high feed rates on surfaces, and B, when you're running very, very tiny end mills. If you have the table moves a tenth and your chip load's only 2/10, that could be a problem. So that's how they address that, is this driven at the center of gravity concept. And to kind of build and test the theory, they started with a very small machine, just because when you work small, everything's cheaper, a little quicker to develop. And then once they kind of had the theory fleshed out, they pushed it into some of their larger equipment. But uh, the machine itself is small but heavy. It's almost 6,000 pounds, but it only has 5.9 inches of X travel.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
and one of the other concepts with being so small is it is thermally controlled. It has a chiller on the back, and it's controlling the ball screw mounts and the casting in several points and the spindle. But when you only have a ball screw, which is, so for that much travel, let's say it's a foot long, when it gets 10 degrees warmer, it's going to, as a unit, grow less over its length of travel than like a 20-inch long ball screw. So being smaller, it sees less volumetric growth when temperature influences hit it. So stuff like that, less overhang on some of the structures, make it more dynamically stiffer. And so it turned out to be just an exceptionally good hard cutting machine when they're all said and done. But the problem is not a lot of people bought them because it only has 5.9 inches of X travel. So this particular machine was owned by DMG Mori, well, just Mori back then. And then it went to the University of California, Berkeley, and that's where it spent the rest of its life until I got it. And Berkeley was basically doing studies on power consumptions with machinery. And if you get on Google Scholar and Google Moriseki NVD 1500, the study is actually of this particular machine. And so I always thought that was kind of neat. And I've always wanted one of these machines, so I had a Google alert set up. And as soon as this one came on the market, I got it. So I was really, really pleased with that.
It's a pretty big, loop too for that machine to travel to get back to you. It's kind of cool.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in transit, there was a little problem. I don't know if it was on the trucker or when we were rigging it in, but it has two Z-axis ball screws, and they share a ball. They have two servos, and they share a servo card. It ever so slightly wiggled out of its terminal slot on the board, and I could not troubleshoot that to save my life. And so eventually I just kind of broke down and called Fanikin, and the guy goes, this new machine new to you? I go, yeah, but I saw it running at the dealer via video. And he just walks around to the control cabinet on the back and just pounds on the drive card with his fist like, it's a jukebox or something, and comes around and hits reset, and the problem's gone. So I was a little annoyed because that was a very expensive, fist bump. But
yeah, he Fonzied you and charged you a whole bunch of money for it.
But after that, it's been dead reliable. So, but that is, that's just kind of new or used machinery problems that you face, which is definitely why I bought the Haas new. I knew when I was getting up and running, I didn't have the time or the money to deal with stuff like that. So by going new, you just relieve yourselves of all those concerns.
So what was that overlap like? Because did you already have the Haas when you left Superb?
Yeah, I had the Haas for about a year and a half when the Maury came up for sale, and I was actually I had already turned in my notice. I was going to go full time with just the Haas, doing what we call soft work. So of all the tool and die components, there's still a lot of like milling, drilling, and tapping that has to happen to them before heat treat. And at the time, I was doing an enormous amount of that, and on the Haas, and I developed pretty good workflows to where I had the common tap drill set up. Even though I had more tools than magazine positions, I could just throw the tool I needed in is pre-touched off, and I was able to make onesie twosie parts very quickly, and so I was doing pretty well with that. Um, but I knew I wouldn't get another chance at a hard cutting machine that can actually fit in my garage, because I had looked at a Kern Evo, but it was a little big, and the Evo isn't exactly the Kern that they advise for hard cutting. So I kind of, I didn't even really go too far down that path. But when this came up, I knew I had to jump on it. Luckily, money was there. I had everything I needed, so I just did it.
Oh, that's great. So I guess, I mean, that kind of brings us back to what made you want to quit your day job and go solo. How did you go about it? How did you know the time was right? We had a few questions from like FTM Machining on Instagram and Triple Caution Machine Works, all asking about the transition from going from what looked like a really stable, good job to what you're doing now.
So it was always there. Like I was always going to have my own business, but in my mind, I was going to just completely have everything perfect and then own my own business. Like I'd build a big shop, I'd slowly acquire machinery, and when I wanted for nothing, then I would start a business. So this was going to be like my 40s, and but at the time I was traveling a good bit for Superb, like 3 days a month doing design work for a customer of theirs at their facility, and I really do not like traveling for work. And so I was like, maybe we accelerate that. And so it just kind of made most sense. If I'm going to get a machine, let's get one that I can not have to have a lot of ancillary equipment to run. I don't need a huge air compressor. I don't need a phase converter if I just get this little Haas. Like I literally ran it on a little 10-gallon air compressor, and it did fine. It runs single phase on a 40 amp breaker. It fit under my normal garage door. So it was a very easy way of getting machining capacity in your garage. So I just went ahead and did that just to get something. I knew I had to have capacity in order to start approaching clients. And I figure I probably won't always be doing stuff with a Haas. Like I might fall into a specialized niche like jig grinding or hard milling. But the nice thing about a Haas is, let's say I sell it in 5 years, I'll probably get 70, 60 cents on the dollar. So it just seemed like a really
they hold their value really well.
Yeah, really good start your shop kind of machine tool. And so once I had that in place, I literally stumbled backwards into work multiple times, like just complete luck on some of my best customers, and um, most of them are tool and die, and that's been pretty good. But one of them is it's just titanium small parts, and I'd never really done a lot in titanium before. Like I always just kind of struggled my way through it, and so I didn't want to quit while I was still getting good at working with titanium because my tool costs were enormous those first couple jobs. And but once I had, what I felt was reoccurring business with a lot of these guys, I felt pretty confident that I could do it. I can go my own way. But I still wanted to retain a relationship with my day job, Superb Industries. So I decided the best way to do it would be give them a very long notice. So I gave them a 6-month notice, and I kept my standards up. I didn't really goof off. I got work done, and at the end of it, they rewarded me with a retaining contract. So basically, I get X number of dollars a month to do X amount of work. So that's guaranteed income. And so that worked out really, really nice. Being on retainer in my position just solves a lot of problems in terms of cash flow. So that I don't know that a lot of employers would do that for somebody who quit. So I was lucky in that regard as well.
Yeah,
That
definitely.
is really awesome of them to do that for you.
And I mean, there's certainly, like, I don't just get money; I have to earn it. But I like it because it keeps me engaged in some pretty high level projects that hold my interest. Like the little titanium knife or titanium parts I make, they don't. I get a little bored with them, but it's nice, decent income. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't just do that. I would drive myself insane. So it's nice to be involved in that world still.
That's great. Yeah. So what do you use? Because I mean, a lot of your stuff is extremely accurate. That you're, hard milling or whatever on your Mori. What do you use
Mhm.
for inspection for parts like that at your home shop?
So I have what's called a gauge amp or electric indicator, and that gives me 1 millionths or 1 micro-inch resolution for measuring if I need it. And so that
Oh,
would be like granite surface plate work. But the bulk of the problem I have is I need to measure somehow a freeform surface, and so I've kind of relied on some like old tricks I've learned over the years. So the last part I did this with, it was kind of like a funnel shape, and it was metal was being formed down into this funnel, and it had a flat face and then like a 30-degree funnel, and then at that corner was a radius. The radius wasn't very critical, but the theoretical sharp corner where the top flat face and the funnel met had to be plus or minus 2/10. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. So a decent way to check something like that is you take a gauge ball, which is essentially a very accurate ball bearing,
Mhm.
and you drop it in there. Everything has to be extremely clean. And then you take an indicator, zero your reference position page on your machine, and then you measure from the face to the top of that ball. And then you can do a little math, and you could get really, really accurate results that way. And so I rely on stuff like that a lot in the machine. And then once it's out of the machine, I have ways I can check angles and their sizes on the granite plate. But
Okay, so
mostly
you're
I rely on my customers. I'll use their metrology.
oh wow, that's a great setup then.
So that's the benefit. All my customers are within 20 minutes. Well, one's like 30. But so that funnel I was talking about, it's for deep drawing in the can tool industry. So um, it's called a profile checker, and it kind of works like a surface finish prothermometer. And the fact that it has a little stylus that drags over the surface. Now, the old ones, there was a
Okay.
mechanical linkage, like a pantograph, and it would literally chart the shape of the surface onto a piece of paper at 10, 20, 50x, whatever you wanted. And then you could overlay that onto an optical comparator. The new ones, it's all digitized, but it gives you a 2D DWG format of the shape of that part in a
Oh
straight line.
wow, that's great.
And so that's a good way to check angle, what size the corner radii are. But that stuff, it's not as hard to do as it sounds. You just have to occasionally like update the size of your ball and mill in your cam sometimes. Like it might
To
be a
speak
touch smaller than advertised.
right. So speaking of cam, what are you using for your home shop?
I'm SolidWorks for CAD and Fusion for CAM. I do pretty well with Fusion. I don't really have any complaints. I don't necessarily like having multiple folders for various files. Like I would prefer just to have all my files for that client in Windows File Explorer. Like I don't like that I have to have a folder in Fusion, one in Windows File Explorer. I feel like that can get a little messy. Um, but one day I definitely see moving to an all-in-one solution like NX, but
Okay.
not right now. I'm not going to do it till a customer makes me. So
Right.
one of my customers is SolidWorks, another is NX, and a third one is SolidWorks, but they're looking heavily at PTC Creo, which
Oh, okay.
entry level price on PTC is very, very good. It's like half the price of SolidWorks, which caught my attention, but it's the add-ons that kill you. It suddenly becomes super expensive. But one thing I would need, and all three of these programs have available, is what's called like strip software. So it'd take a folded up stamped part, show you what it looks like flat. And I know a lot of people are saying, "Oh, well, sheet metal tools will do that," but it doesn't really do it how we need it done. Does that make sense? And then this also just it's kind of optimized for stamping. It really speeds up building the tool as well because it could look at the gap around the part and build a punch to remove that material very quickly. And everything's parametrically linked. And like I said, all three programs offer some form of software that does that. So I eventually see doing that because the design side of my business is pretty strong. It's probably 20 to 30% of what I do, and I would like to maybe get that up to 50.
Oh, yeah. I had no idea that you did that much design work.
What's kind of nice is, I have like a wall around me with carbide machining, um, so I can design die components where I just did some. They were hardened steel, but the production die will be carbide. Where not a lot of other people can do them because I designed them around my capabilities, and so I get the the replacement component work then, which that's a lot of times where the money's at.
Oh, yeah, definitely. That makes sense.
Because like
So,
all
Adam,
the punches and die inserts in a die, at least in our world, because of the volumes, are wear parts. Like we treat them like an end mill almost.
huh,
Jeez.
interesting. So, Adam, let's say I'm to kind of break down your process. So, let's say you get, let's say, a carbide part or like a punch or something that you need to make on your Mori. What is your process from, like, where do you get the information on? How do you know how to cut carbide? How do you know what tools to get? How do you deal with tool life and all
Well,
of those fun things?
there's not a lot of players in that game. It's basically Union Tool, PH Horn, and I think Frasia now offers something, but it might be the case where I know Union Tool sells their tools to other companies, and there's like multiple companies selling that what they call a carbide cutting end mill. It's just a relabeled Union Tool. Uh, so I made the decision early on, like let's get real cozy as we can with Union Tool, and they just have a ton of process knowledge. Their salespeople really, really, really know what they're doing, pushing that product. So I definitely leaned on those guys first couple times I did it. But then the other thing is they have a lot of case studies that you have access to. And so you can kind of glean some info there because speeds, feeds, DOC, all that. It's definitely not everything. Little subtle things like approach and lead-in feed rates are very critical when you're milling carbide. Um, Especially if you have like a kind of a rib section that you're milling into, you can almost have to cut your lead-in feed rates down to 10%. And so little things like that, there's definitely a steep learning curve, but Union Tool was very good about getting me going. They wanted to see their tools succeed in my shop, so that helped tremendously. That and I don't know, some of it's just common sense. Like I still try to grind as much as I can. The milling of the carbide's very slow, so I put it on the surface grinder and peel off as much stock as I can.
So are you milling these carbide parts? I mean, I have no experience with this. Are you doing it carbide with carbide, or are you using diamond tools? Or are you
It
using
is
ceramic
diamond
tools?
coated carbide.
Okay.
And then
That
some of
sounds
the others, like
expensive.
PH Horn, I don't know. I think it's a PCD insert, but
Okay.
the I need to maybe talk to PH Horn at some point, but they didn't quite go as small as Union Tool, and unfortunately, in the electronic stamping world, which is kind of where I'm at, everything's getting miniaturized, so features just keep getting driven smaller and smaller. So I don't, from what I saw, PH Horn didn't have a lot of offerings under 1 millimeter.
So what's your smallest end mill that you use regularly? I guess?
To date, 4,000 is the smallest, and I use that on 2 jobs. But I use a 0.2 millimeter. I use that a lot, um, mainly because that's like a 0.2 or 0.25 is a real common corner radius for like stamped parts. If they don't want to burr, they'll call that out. So you have to basically make a negative shape of the stamped part with that radius in the corner that comes down and coins that radius onto the part. So I go through a lot of those. So like
So
point
what kind
two
of
is 8 thou roughly.
right? What kind of tool life can you expect? Like how many? I guess it's measured in minutes, I would assume, of cutting time, or is it inches of cutting? Or
Um, I usually try to shoot for 10 hours of cut time in the carbide.
wow,
And
that's actually
if
pretty
I can
impressive.
get 10 hours out of it, I'm doing all right. But it's still like a $300 end mill. So that's still $30
Jeez.
an hour in consumable cost. That's why I try to get 10 hours.
Yeah, I bet.
I was doing a part the other day and I went to offset down um, 2/10 and I got 2 thou, which that didn't ruin the
Oh,
part, believe it or not, but it did ruin the $300 end mill. And
Oof.
oh,
and that stings real bad. So I'm kind of
that's
learning,
terrible.
like pricing that stuff. It's basically I always approached it as my normal shop rate plus $30 an hour because the tool cost per hour is so high. But I'm realizing like one slip up, I can undo a week's worth of work because if I crash a tool into a part and scrap both, some of these work pieces, by the time I get them, they have $1,000 price tags on them. So I'm reevaluating how I price the carbide milling. Um, what I do with it, I do pretty well, but I'm worried if something tragic happens, it's just going to create a huge hole to dig out of.
So speaking of these work pieces that cost so much, what tricks I guess have you learned in tool and die, and how do you approach things like that to ensure you don't make mistakes? I mean, obviously everybody makes mistakes like you just did, but it sounds like you have a pretty
Um,
good track record.
yeah, like I know a lot of guys say it, but I've never crashed either one of my machines. Like it took me so long to learn to slow down Like I remember the first shop that taught me CNC, I was always in such a hurry, and I was always like, doing dumb stuff and having minor crashes, like chip your insert style crashes, or you know, melt the drill kind of stuff. And it just, I don't know, it was late 20s. I finally just kind of got into a pace where I was no longer in a hurry, and miraculously, the speed at which I could do stuff skyrocketed. Uh, so slow down to speed up, I guess, is the trick there. But um, I also I have a workflow where I get up real early in the morning. I do all my batch emails. I get all that out of the way, and then from like 4:30 or 5, once I'm done with my email, till 9, I'm more or less in solve problem mode, setup mode. I don't try to have any distractions at that time. And then from 10 o'clock on, that's when I start making phone calls and doing stuff like that. So I just, whenever I'm doing something that's high risk, like setting up or programming, I try to make sure I have a real clean frame of mind.
That's a good tip for sure.
So, Adam, you mentioned tooling costs as far as end mills go. Your Mori takes a very small HSK holder, and I know those are not cheap.
Yeah. Couple problems there is they're obscure, so anything not produced in high quantities is going to be more expensive. But B, I mean, they just have to be inherently high quality for the type of work you're doing. So finding ones that are balanced to 40,000 RPMs can be a bit of a hassle. Um, and then, for the work I'm doing, I definitely need a low run out solution. So by the time you get a high speed balanced holder with a high precision collet in it, you're looking at about $500 a holder.
Oof.
But yeah, yeah, and guys are looking at Kerns with 100 tool magazines. Yeah.
So
So
if you
by the
ended up
time you get
with
a
a
Kern
current,
loaded up with pallets, you're at like 200 grand in pallets and tool holders. That's a tough pill to swallow.
so is this the same taper that the Kerns use? If you ended up with one
The
of those in the future?
Kerns, the bigger ones run HSK 40. So in HSK land, the number is the flange diameter. So that'd be 40 millimeters. I run HSK 32. And then the smaller ones, like the Evo, runs HSK 25.
Okay. And you
And
said that your machine's a 40K machine then?
yes. And
So
it's
what is your
repairing. So
what does your Haas have then? Because you said you were doing some work in that
when I
before you got Mori.
yeah, when I bought that Haas, they just released the 10K spindle option for the minis. Before then, they were just 6. So I got the 10K option for it. And yeah, I mean, the one of the first paying jobs I had on it was milling carbide. And
Wow.
I always kind of chuckle because like 2 years ago, I made a video of milling an end mill, like a carbide end mill. And like just recently Kern released theirs on Instagram. People are kind of going heads over heels about it, and I'm like, oh man, I did that a while ago. But on a Haas,
Oh
the
wow.
carbide
You would
milling
have broke the internet.
yeah, the carbide milling process, it does well when slowed down. It doesn't hamper tool life that much. It just it takes 4 times as long because a lot of the stuff I'm doing, I'm at max RPM on the Mori. So if I go from 40 down to 10K, it's really just super difficult to be profitable.
Jeez. Yeah, I can only imagine.
But no, the Haas, I'm really happy with it for some of the dumb stuff I've made it do. I got it with high speed machining, 10K spindle. After I bought it, I had put a 4th axis on it, and they didn't charge me for the install of the axis. That's kind of like a negotiated thing, so that was kind of a nice little deal they made me. So I don't feel like, oh, I should have done that when I bought it, because my mentality was, again, get machining capacity in my garage as cheap as possible. And I knew for tool and die work, I didn't really need a fourth axis, but I wanted one because I want to eventually, do like 5-sided machining. But I figured that would be kind of a good trial start, is get one of those kind of L-shaped fixtures for the fourth axis, which holds a self-centering vise.
Mm-hmm.
And so I could do like 3 sides of a cube that way. And I want to, when I get more annealed work, I want to start doing it that way.
Okay.
But
Now, does your Haas have probing?
yeah, I got the Renault package on it. I don't think I'll ever buy a machine without that again. That is really just, I had used it on and off on other machines, and then I kind of lived without it for a long time at Superb. And so it really felt like a luxury when I bought it for the Haas. But man, it speeds up my day so much.
Now, how do you touch tools off on the Mori?
That's a good question. So I basically, since it's a HSK, it's a dual contact. It sits on that face flange, and I treat that as the 0 gauge line. So if I take that then and rest it on 3 points on a surface plate or on something flat, and I measure from those points up to the tip of the tool, that's my gauge length.
Okay. So how did you do that for like the 4th end mill?
Well, so because that's so fragile, Robin Renzetti helped me out here. We kind of came up with the idea of, let me grab it. We had a piece of spring steel, and it's electrically isolated from the table. And what I did for that is I had a out of tolerance ceramic gauge block that I mounted this piece of spring steel on. And so I come down, and then I check for continuity between my reference tool and the spring steel. And so basically when my multimeter beeps, it's just made contact. And I'm moving down in 10 millionths increments.
Whoa.
And then that's how I set my tool length. And it is astonishingly accurate. The only problem is I have ceramic bearings. So I have to attach the lead of the multimeter directly to the tool holder. So it's not like a quick process. It's not like I could set it up and do 30 tools real quick. It's very manual, but it's also super duper accurate.
You just blew my mind on how to touch tools off.
Yeah, that is a really, really cool idea.
Credit goes to Robin. So it definitely
really
has
cool,
some
bro.
refinement that needs done. But what my thought is video microscopes are getting so cheap nowadays. Try to find one that has crosshairs and come down and zero it optically, because you could do that at speed. So you see a lot of guys doing high-speed machine work like that using laser setters. That's because they want to get gauge length while the spindle's running at speed, because you do see a little bit of axial shift when it gets up to speed.
Right, as that taper expands, the hollow taper expands.
So that's definitely something I'm going to have to add to the machine, but I'm just kind of getting by without it right now.
Well, it sounds like you've got a pretty cool process. I mean, in the meantime.
Yeah, it's for like literally I built it in about 15 minutes with just junk I had lying around, and it worked really well. So
You definitely have to post some pictures on Instagram of that.
yeah, I'll run through it with the video. It works really, really well, and it's one of those things. It'd be neat to throw out in the community and see what improvements each little person makes to it, and kind of revisit where it's at in a year. I love when a lot of people kind of work on the same thing and see what shakes out.
Yeah. So, Adam, how big is your garage? I wanted to ask you that. How many square feet?
So the part my machines are in is 190 square feet.
Okay.
Now I have like a parking half, which I was able to park in up until July. But when I got my new air compressor, it puts off a lot of hot air from the drying system. So I put it kind of over in the parking half. And at that point, I insulated and drywalled the machine tool half, but the parking half's just kind of like an old garage. So I'm slowly going to start chipping away at getting that insulated and drywalled. And so hopefully that'll get me like almost 400 square feet by the
Okay.
end of the year, which I don't think I'm really going to do anything with other than like, I don't even have a bench to work on dies. I use my picnic table outside, so it has to be a nice day if I'm working on something. So I think that's just literally going to be like workshop space over there and storage.
Okay.
I want to get like
Because
another
you
list of
also have
cabinet
a.
because Saunders he stopped up and he just kind of looking around. He he pointed out some deficiencies with my end mill storage, and he's absolutely right. I have too much crap crammed into too small of an area, and so I want to get like a eye level Lista cabinet with 2-inch drawers and dedicate that to cutter storage. So part of my problem is I have a wide array of materials I cut, and I like specified end mills for those materials. So I have titanium, I have CBN, I have those carbide cutting end mills, I have regular hard cutting end mills, and then I have them in a bunch of sizes. And so I have a lot of tool inventory, and so I need a lot of space to store it.
And you also have a surface grinder in this small space.
Yeah, and that's like more of a support equipment thing. I use that just for like necking end mills, flattening fixtures. It's or if I need to remove a lot of carbide from a part I'm milling. It's not something I bid jobs in with really. I've done a few for like one of my customers had 10 parts he didn't want to send out for double disc grinding. He asked if I could do it real quick. I'll do like favor jobs like that, but I really don't try to pursue work just for the surface grinder because it's a manual hand crank grinder, so it takes 100% of your attention. Whereas I could run two machines simultaneously, or one machine and be doing some design work in the background. So it's really really difficult for me to at the end of the week feel like I've made a lot of money just running a grinder.
Definitely. That makes complete sense.
Yeah, and going to that auction was kind of illuminating. A lot of the guys, it was a wire EDM shop in kind of the heart of carbide die country, and a lot of the guys there ran surface grinder shops, and they were just hoping to pick up some little support equipment, and just kind of like talking with those guys about rate. It just I feel like they're so good at what they do, and there's so many of them. It would just be super difficult to compete in that arena. So I'm happy to kind of specialize in hard milling.
So what does the future hold for your company? Do you want another hard milling machine, or what's
So
what's the goal?
this summer I had the opportunity to tour Danny Rudolph's shop, and that was really eye opening because I think that's something like my wife and I both want is to just work together in our little building for the rest of our lives, and that's certainly something he seemed to have done for himself, and he's done it really well in my opinion. And the gist I got from Danny is, running Swiss is super easy. There's nothing to it. But no, I mean, it looked really
I don't know
hard,
about that one.
but yeah, it looked really hard. But being able to walk away from machines for several hour stretches of time is what makes a lot of his business work. And neither of my machines is really capable of being away from it for a long time. So I need to look at maybe either a pallet pull machine, and basically my day consists of setting up work pieces and tools and programs. Or I maybe need to look at an emerging technology like direct metal laser centering machines that have milling enabled. Like Metsura has the Lumex. Sodic also has like a 3D printer mill. And the Sodic one's
So are
kind of
those
neat.
starting?
What?
Are those starting to pop up in the mold making world?
In mold making, they definitely are, because there's just a lot of neat stuff you could do, like print cooling channels into the mold. Not quite there in the die making world. I, I, I think a lot of the metals aren't quite there yet. Like you're not seeing like these really aggressive stamping die steels. They're like they have some hardened tool steels you can print, but it's kind of the more vanilla ones. But I think in like maybe 5 years that'll be there. And the one thing I kind of picked up from this wire EDM auction, so it was started late 80s. Now, wire EDMs right now are kind of obscure. Like not a lot of shops have them. Think about that in the late 80s, and that's all this company did. And so the original founder was kind of the only game in town in that industry for a long time. And because he invested heavily in an emerging technology, and then he sold the business. So I think, always kind of be investing in emerging technologies and then maybe divesting in them 10 years later might be a good way to do things. Problem is,
Right.
emerging technologies are very expensive.
Oh yeah.
So, the Lumex, it's definitely out of my price range. I might consider like just a laser centering 3D printer. That's a little more normal. But when you add that milling spindle, it gets a little crazy price wise.
Definitely. So you going back, you'd also mentioned a pallet pull machine. I mean, what else? All I can think of is the Kern off the top of my head that would be able to do that. Are there any other players in the hard milling or area that have that kind of machine?
Yeah, Kern's definitely not unique in that arrangement. Like Micron has a 200 millimeter travel machine. It's like the HSM 200 LP or something. And it's essentially checks all the same boxes as the Kern. Holds like a combination of tools or pallets. It's very small. It's 1 or 2 micron precise. So I think trying to think some of the others. Toshiba has machines like that. If you let's say you wanted to get into like one of the hydrostatic weighed ones with linear motors, like the new Kern HD, that they're definitely there's less of that in the world. But even there's even competition with that. Like Nanotech Systems has a machine that's very comparable. But again, once you kind of get into the hydrostatic weighs and linear motors, it's price tags getting up there. So, but I could definitely, hopefully, one day see something like a normal Kern Micro or that little Micron, or Makino has a D200Z 5-axis machine that's pretty affordable, really. Something like that with some automation, I think would handle a lot of what I do.
Okay. That's very cool.
I like the idea of 3D printing too, if it fits my industry. Just from all you gotta do is hit Control P. That's the mentality at least. But
right. So one other question we had, and it kind of goes back to what we were just talking about a little while ago, is from NS Precision on Instagram, and he was asking all of us, what advice do we have for small shop organization? Because
Okay.
he's also in a garage with the robo drill, and I feel like there's a lot of little shops out there, and we're all kind of struggling with the same issues.
I'm not too kicked in the head with shower bins. I kind of like jumped on them, just kind of everyone else was doing it, and they're cheap enough, but it's not a perfect setup for varying sizes of end mills. What I do like, Lista has these like grooved trays that you can move a divider around in.
Okay.
They're like, you can get them in varying widths, anywhere from like 1 inch groove width up to 2 inch. And I have all my taps stored in those right now, just kind of try them out. And I kind of like that system a lot. So the problem is they're about 5 times the price of a shower bin. So, but
Right. I'll just look them up, and I know exactly what you're talking about now. Yeah.
yeah. But in terms of density of storage, I can get a lot more per shelf with a system like that than I can with the shower bins. Which
Yeah,
that's
because you're not using
problem.
too much.
Me personally, I don't like the little plastic end mill bins. I would love to see a system that gets rid of those. Like I don't like that I'm setting up on like a 10-piece job and I know the tool's going to last through the job and I'll reuse it. And so I have like, I don't know, a dozen of these little plastic bins just kind of chilling out till I'm done with the job and I can put the end mills back in them. And it just drives me insane. So I would like to find a tool storage solution that gets me away from that. But yeah, I mean, as far as organization, I just have a ton of stuff. I know where it all is. It's all laid out neatly, but I'm not exactly impressed with my organization in terms of how neat it looks. There's no cut foam or anything like that. There's no labels. So that's an area I can improve.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. I mean, I've got some of the showers as well for our end mills and drills and taps, and like you said, they're kind of an imperfect solution, but they do the job, I guess.
Yeah.
We Kaizen foamed both of our workstations right by the mills, with the Allen keys and all of that, and that definitely helped. But yeah, I think that's also a place I could improve upon. Like you said, I've got a ton of stuff and I know where it is, but like it's, I'll have a drawer that has tape and multimeters and electronic stuff together, and like there's no rhyme or reason. I just happen to know where it is and it all fit together at that point. So I definitely could do better.
Yeah. I definitely sort drawers by work type. Like I'll have all my electronic stuff in one drawer, and then I'll have like all my setup tools, like a soft face hammer or torque wrench. I have those all kind of up in the top drawer. One thing I started doing since I moved into the shop at home is in the top drawer I have my hex keys, inch and metric, but I have 2 sets because I might be like, behind the machine fixing something. I have to run around and, change an insert or something. And it's just really nice to like, where did I put my keys? And oh, well, just grab the second set. So like I'm starting to duplicate on like those common tools like that. And that's made life a little easier, I think. And I mean, it's kind of a cheap quality of life thing. Like second set of hex keys isn't really that killer price wise.
Yeah, any of those kind of upgrades where it makes you feel better every single day that you use them, but they're a drop in the bucket. Those are always something that I try to take care of immediately too.
Man.
What about you, Peyton?
Oh, I was gonna say I just got that McMaster 5-gallon pump set up, and I was gonna tell you about that. And that for coolant, I haven't tried it with coolant. I tested it with water, but that is going to make life amazing.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So you need to get yours assembled.
I really do.
Yeah, I have a hose I siphon oil out of the barrel with. I don't use my mouth. I put it up to the vacuum cleaner till I see it coming through, and then I pull the vacuum.
That was my
Pretty high
first
tech.
question was by mouth?
Nah.
Very
And like little stuff like that is one of the problems of being in your garage is I get 55-gallon drums delivered and no way of like offloading them easily. And so, things just get a little risky with some shipments. And so that's the problem of not having industrial space is I don't have even like a forklift or, a pallet jack, stuff like that.
So that kind of leads into one of the last questions that I had written down at least was what tool or process do you miss having access to from your day job? And you already said that you work there on occasion and you're on retainer, but what thing do you miss having constant access to, I guess?
All the little support stuff like bench grinders, belt sanders, a saw I don't want to light on fire. Like, just they had really high quality support equipment. Like as a small little startup, I would never think about spending money on a drill press. But man, when you just have to make a simple hole, drill presses are pretty cool. And just I miss little stuff like that tremendously. Everything's just
Yeah, I
harder without it. You could still get the job done, but it's harder.
I certainly empathize with you. Like, going between my day job and my shop, like we've started picking up smaller stuff like that, but yeah, there's all of those little quality of life stuff that a business that's been around for a while has that you never realize that you use so much until they're gone.
Yeah. And that's kind of some of the stuff I wanted to get when I went to that auction. But that sort of stuff has universal appeal. Like people who aren't necessarily in the tool and die trade still want, a nice bench grinder. So that stuff kind of commanded too high of a price for me to buy as a luxury at this point. So I do
What'd you
without.
end up walking away with?
Uh, a lot of like oddly specific stuff. So there was a set of crow blocks, which are like chromium carbide. Um, so they're more or less like steel, but with a little less thermal expansion. And so I have carbide blocks because you always I was taught you want to match your gauge blocks to the material you're measuring if possible. For if you're in a not so thermally consistent room. So I use those, but I wanted just kind of a beater set for setting up sign plates and stuff like that. So getting a partial set that's only missing 2 blocks, and they're good blocks. Everything's still in spec. What's there? So that was a nice deal. I got a 10-inch mag chuck, which I'm going to try to get onto the Mori, which it's 10x6. It's a Walker Ceramax, which is a really good chuck, but it doesn't. It's a little too big for that machine. So I'm going to have to make like a sub plate just to get it on there. What else? Oh, I got some like weird grinding fixtures. They were in a box for $25. No one was bidding on them, and 2 of them I'll probably use. 2 of them. Sometimes when you do the stuff I do, it's nice just to have hardened stock. So I know these are A2. I know they're 58 Rockwell. So I can take an abrasive cutoff wheel and chop them into something else real quick. And so it's nice to have hard stuff lying around. I got a ball vise, which is a polishing vise. Self centers, and then you can tilt it any axis and spin it. So that's really nice for polishing inserts. What else? Oh, a little Mitutoyo height gauge stand in a MAR 50 millionths height gauge. So those are nice just to have on the bench to run parts under, make sure they're kind of all compliant. And then one of the shops I was talking to, they had bid on a bunch of Harvey end mills on accident. They thought they were getting wire EDM guide bushings, but they were bidding on the wrong lot. So they ended up getting, it's like 20 Harvey end mills, 10,000 through 30,000 ball mill, and they got them for like $50. And the guy's like, "Do you want them? I have no need for them." And I almost didn't do it because none of them are coated. So the only thing they're really good for is like light duty machining and graphite, which I don't do a ton of, but I was like, you know what, $50 kind of builds out the inventory. Why not? So I mean, it's several $100s in cutters, so and it's Harvey, so I don't have a problem with the quality.
Well, that sounds like a pretty good day at the auctions then.
Yeah, it's fun to do every once in a while, just to kind of rub shoulders with people. You get a lot of advice, both advice you want and don't want, but it's the camaraderie is good. A lot of people there know the same people, so just kind of spinning tails and chit chatting. It was nice.
Yeah, that's great. And it sounds like you kept your wits. I know a lot of people. I've been to a few auctions, and people, end up bidding against each other, so they're spending almost brand new prices on used equipment just because they think they're going to save a buck or two.
Well, this auction was kind of interesting. There really nothing went for a lot of money. I threw kind of some Insta stories up what things were going for, and like most of the EDMs didn't even sell. Like $1,500 was the low bid, and people like nobody wanted it, and the auctioneer wouldn't go any lower. And I mean, they were old machines, but it, everyone there, because they were in that industry, kind of knew what stuff was worth. And a lot of those guys just had so much of the support equipment and fixtures and stuff like that. So yeah, there's definitely some good deals there, but it did kill 2 days of productivity. So that'll show up at the end of the week on the balance sheet.
Yeah, definitely. Did you have anything else that you wanted to ask, Peyton? I think we kind of walked through all of our questions pretty quick.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. One thing I was thinking of, Adam, is you said you were running your Haas on a very small air compressor at the time.
Yeah, well, now it's not. Now it's on a Kaiser air tower.
So my question for you is, I'm running mine on a Atlas Copco GX5, and I'll have to check the horsepower and the tank size, but my compressor is a screw compressor, and it runs like nonstop. And I'm wondering if, I don't know if it's just because I'm running 10,000 RPMs for, 18 hours straight, or if I have a really bad leak somewhere that I'm missing, or I'm curious on your air consumption.
Is yours like an air purge spindle, perhaps?
I know
Like
it's.
mine?
I was going to say, I know mine's air actuated oiler for the spindle.
So that's probably what it is. Mine was a grease packed spindle.
Okay.
So the only thing it uses air for is the tool change.
That makes sense.
So Haas advised 4.8 CFM. So I bought a 5 CFM compressor, which that's pushing it. But it probably ran once every 10 minutes during like production style machining where I was making a lot of something with a lot of tool changes. So for that machine, it made a lot of sense. It was one of those California air tools. It's like a diaphragm compressor. So they're super duper quiet, which is another concern I have. I have houses within 20 feet on either side of my garage. So I try to keep the noise low.
I know the feeling. Whenever I'm using a shear hog, I'm worried when someone walks by the house.
Yeah. I have a question for you guys.
Oh boy!
Of course.
Just kind of like continuation of my Instagram post. I'm like, how do you see yourself cashing out? Like when, like everyone's like, I'm going to work till I die, but sometimes medically you don't have that option. So like, what's your when you need to stop machining? What's your thoughts on how to do that?
Dylan,
like
you
sell
want
the
to take
company,
this first?
auction the assets, or it was a big question to spring on you.
For us. No, not at all. It's something we thought about a lot. I don't feel like I absolutely love machining, and I don't think I'll ever stop making things. I don't know that my business now and being a job shop will keep my interest forever. So I plan on growing the business to where we can have the opportunity to sell it and probably sell it off and then start another venture eventually. I mean, this is not, I don't plan on quick turning my business at any point, but it's long-term goal. I would love to make it big enough that it is a attractive business for somebody else to purchase.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I don't know, find something else, whatever my current interests are. And then, no matter what, if I sold my business, I would buy a machine and throw it in my garage and still be making stuff. But I know how
that's kind of
fast.
my goal for life as well, too. But, I don't want to die and have like 50,000 pounds of machinery in my garage that somebody has to deal with either. I would just like one or two kind of mill and a lathe type machines and just kind of fiddle fart around with that kind of stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I was thinking about that auction lot. Peyton, you got any thoughts or?
I like Dylan's answer, and I totally agree with that. If anything, if you can get lucky and find someone that's interested in the company as a whole, that'd make things easier to some extent. But I hate seeing stuff at auction sell for that cheap. I mean, it's just really sad to see nice equipment go for so cheap.
Yeah, and like I knew the owner's situation, and I knew he was hoping to kind of raise a lot of money at the auction, and he did not. And
Yeah,
I want to make sure I'm never in that position. Like, debt wise, that's never going to be a problem for me. But, let's just say I'm incapacitated and I need to get money out of the business. I don't want to have to like watch it all sell for pennies on the dollar. So I want to have the business in a place where it could be sold lock, stock, and barrel, or something like that. But one of my thoughts is, so I have this machine which generates a lot of money and can buy stuff. Maybe use the business to be the excuse for buying commercial real estate, like a duplex style building. And that's kind of like my cash out policies. The machines aren't going to be worth a ton, but I have a nice piece of commercial real estate, which has rental potential or can be turned into any number of things. And that's the real value of my business when I'm ready to leave it. But
that's a good way to look at it.
yeah, I also really like working in my garage. It's pretty cool. So.
Oh, it's so nice.
Yeah, I'm jealous, guys.
Not trying to rub it in, but being able to go downstairs and load parts before you go to bed is pretty nice.
Yeah, like, just I could probably routinely on the Mori get 18 hours of runtime a day because of that. So I don't want to lose that necessarily, but nobody's going to buy a business that's in your garage. I don't think either. But.
Yeah,
that's a really interesting question, though. I'd love to hear if any of our listeners have any good answers or want to contribute to that conversation. I'd love to hear more points of view on that. That's a really interesting jumping off point.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
always have to have an
like,
exit plan.
Yeah, nobody wants to like think about the end, I don't think. But that's life.
Well, I mean, even if it's not like the end because of death, though, like there are many circumstances that lead to a business, either you losing interest or not wanting to do it, or you can't anymore, or, there's a lot of reasons that people end up having to close their business. And it is, I feel like it's something that a lot of people don't think about.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that was a good podcast.
Go out on a
Adam, do you have
then?
anything else?
No, I think that covers it for me.
Okay. Yeah. Dylan, anything else to say?
No, just, now that we've depressed everyone listening, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
Yeah, really. Sell your assets tomorrow. Yeah, but other than that, make sure you guys share the podcast on Instagram. I know I've been seeing a lot of people tagging it in their stories recently, which is awesome. And then if you aren't following us on Instagram, it's Within Tolerance Podcast. And then make sure you review it on iTunes. All the places you can review the podcast to get our rankings up. That would be greatly appreciated. And once again, thank you, Adam, for coming on. And you're more than welcome to come back on anytime in the future.
Yeah, thank you so
Thanks
much,
for having
Adam.
me, guys. I enjoyed it. All right.
All right, guys, that'll
Have a
be
good night.
episode 12. We'll see you next week.